Our guest today on Mooroopna Legends needs no introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, the funniest man in Mooroopna, Graeme PEE WEE Young.
First of all, the name Pee Wee, how'd you get that?
Apparently when I was a young buck, we were out Ardmona. I was born up at Beechworth, but we lived in a little place called Wandilligop. And when Dad went to war, we went back home to the Ardmona homestead. And apparently we're at a working bee for the footy club or something. Dad played footy. And they had a barbecue. Didn't call them barbecues in them days. It was just sausages and homemade rissoles and homemade tomato sauce. And there was one little bloke who kept licking the top of the sauce bottle. And one old lady there said, "Christ, look at him, he's like a little Pee-wee." And that's how it stuck. Of course, a Pee-wee's a little mudlark, a cheeky little magpie type of thing.
What happened?
Don't know. I lost some doubt. I think Dr. Foster's expanding liquid may have helped.
When did you first come about that you felt that your calling in life, that you had something very special?
Always liked doing a bit of entertaining and that type of thing. And I got the opportunity, of course, to play in the band. And then a fellow by the name of Graeme McCartney managed me and got me telling jokes. I used to tell them for nothing down at the footy club and at different functions and that. Anyway, this bloke said, "You can get paid for that." And I said, "They won't get that." Anyway, they did. And the rest history.
Well, we'll talk about your entertainment career in depth very shortly.
Yep.
But first of all, tell us something about yourself. You were brought up in Ardmona?
Brought up mainly in Ardmona. Poppy Arthur, that was my granddad. My mum was an Arthur, as was old Jack Arthur, of course, a brother. They had a large family, 11 or so of them. Mum died when giving birth to the latest child, Helen Amelia Arthur. And they lived in what is now known as Arthur's Lane out in Ardmona. It's a small lane, runs off of the Ardmona North Mooroopna Road. And it's a nice, we had a little opening ceremony there one Easter. And Sherry Crawford, the Shire President of Shire of Waranga, she come and opened it for us, or Rodney. And it was a great day. So I lived out there my junior life. And then when I was 6, I suppose, we moved into Mooroopna, into the metropolis. And I've been here ever since.
You played all your sport in Mooroopna?
All your sport with Mooroopna. Played a couple of years cricket out at Ardmona. My cousin Ellen Rogerson. She was my auntie, she was Mum's sister, his mum. And he was a great cricketer, and we only had A and B grade, I think, here. A grade matting or something, and B grade team. Yeah, very hard to get a game. We had a very good side out at Ardmona. We won final after final. And then they approached me to come back here and play cricket, and played for years and years and years, become on to be president, secretary, treasurer, everything.
Played with some great names out of Ardmona?
Yeah, there was Rogie, Fats Campbell, Stan Cornish, he played out there, Keith Snell, Alan Bowles, Slim Savage, some very good cricketers.
And a legend in his own lifetime, who unfortunately passed away, Keith Luscombe. Keith Luscombe,
Keith was a great player. Casey Hatton also played out there for a season or two, I'm not sure. But no, we had a very good side. And very, very basic facilities, as was the same here at Mooroopna. The Connors Pavilion now, that used to be a tin shed, and it was full of, somebody got the idea they'd store all our turf in there, which was great, except if we've got a bit of a rainy day, everybody was walking 3 feet off the ground. We had all the turf stuck to our shoes.
How many years did you play cricket for Mooroopna?
Oh, jeez. Started when I was under 14, and I was still going into my 50s, so, and there was 2 or 3 years, or 2.5 years or something out of that I played Ardmona. That was about, played all my cricket there.
Served on the committee for a number of years, president and secretary both of the cricket club, yep, and a life member of the cricket club.
Yep. I'm the SCA executive, and I was fortunate enough to win the Albie Wayman Award for promoting local cricket and that. We used to go on TV, GMV6 and all that type of thing, and it was very interesting. Good times.
Great time.
A bit different now. There's money's jiggered it up. Everybody's paying money to players now, and that never happened in our day.
And of course at the moment your son is president of the Mooroopna Cricket Club, so it's gone handed down father to son?
Yep. I think it's one of the only clubs where they'd have a father-son who have both been president and both life members of the same club. Great honour.
Yeah, very significant indeed.
Yeah.
And of course with the football side of things. You're a pretty smart footballer, Roger Bullen tells us.
Yeah, Roger would say that because the year he coached me I won the Abacare medal, and he said it was good coaching that done that. Now I enjoyed me footy, copped a lot of injuries, hell of a lot of injuries, and yeah, I had ongoing health problems all right through it, but when I finished I got them fixed up and all was good. But we never won a grand final in the seniors. We made it to a grand final one year when I was playing, and I broke my sternum two games before the grand final, and they wouldn't play me without a doctor's certificate, which I wrote one out for myself, and I played 19th man, and I got to run the last quarter, and I think we were 12, 15 goals down that time. Yeah.
Life member of the Mooroopna Football Club as well?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you served as president and secretary and other positions on the committee over a long period of time?
Not with the footy club, only secretary, general manager, treasurer, secretary for years. Yeah, no, I enjoyed that, the admin side, and of course now with the past players that's very successful.
Yeah, well, the past players, it is unique in itself. Been around since what, 1976?
Yeah, 40 odd years we've been going. Yeah.
Yeah, very significant. And you're being secretary, secretary, and for all that time?
Secretary all of that time, probably treasurer for the first 15, 16 years as well. And then we blossomed out, and Jim Nichols is now our treasurer. But we made Jim a life member the other day, and he's not too well at the moment. He's just recovering from a heart operation. And nobody wants me to nominate them for life membership anymore because they all get crook. But that happens when you get old.
It does. Now, the past players, to have an organisation last for 40 years is unique. What's been the secret?
I think we send out 2 or 3 newsletters a year. Now we have email, of course, and we can keep contact with them. And our membership's down about $5. I think they're reviewing it this year. But it's cheap, you know, $5. We run a couple of pokey trips throughout the year. The main thing is of a Thursday night we have a get-together down at the footy ground, watch and train. Or we say we watch and train. We have a big fire down there, and we're licensed, so we have a few beers down there, or I used to. Don't now, unfortunately. Matter of fact, Pat Sleeth, a publican who was publican at the whole 3 pubs at one stage. One bloke said to him, "How many pubs in Mooroopna?" He said, 4. He said, "I've only seen the Cricketers' Arms, the Commercial and the Royal Mail." Yeah, he said, "and Pee Wee's down at the footy ground." Anyway, it was great. But the half-time functions at every home game, they've been a real winner. We introduced that some 30 odd years ago, and we get a former player or official, and we bring them back on the day, and we honour them and give them a crowd there. We get 40, 50, sometimes up to 70 or 80 up at half time. It's in the cricket club rooms now, the Parsons Pavilion, and we go back over that player or official's history and their contribution to sport in and around Mooroopna. It's very interesting. They get a certificate after, and everybody, they want to get up and be there. And we get a good crowd there. We charge a couple of bucks to come up, but they get a sanger and a beer, and everybody's laughing.
Is a unique organisation. It's very, very popular indeed. Other clubs have tried to model it, but they haven't always succeeded.
I think they get too big, Graeme, and they try to support buying players for the club. And what becomes as an interest, and you turn up and it virtually costs you nothing, suddenly you're putting your hand in your pocket for 70 or 80 bucks or 100 bucks a year, plus your membership. And yeah, and they buy players, and those players, as you would well know, being, you know, president of the footy club and with the Goulburn Valley Footy League, a lot of those players, you pay out big money for them. They're only there for a year, so we concentrate on the youth. Anybody who makes a representative side from our juniors, we toss in 100 bucks or so to help cover their expenses and perhaps get them something, you know, to help them along their way, and hopefully they continue to play sport. We hope it's with Mooroopna, of course, but not necessarily do we care. It's to help that young person, whether it be young boy, young girl, netballer, girl footballers now, to you know, continue to play sport and be a useful part in the community.
You've met some great characters over your time in Mooroopna. Who springs to mind as some of the great characters, and for what reason?
You get blokes like Jimmy Dobbin, of course, the phantom of the MCG. I've never known a bloke like that. He'd go down without a ticket even to get into the footy, and they'd somehow get into the ground, and as the players run onto the ground, he would walk onto the oval with a suit and a gabardine overcoat on the clipboard, and he'd walk around, and he'd usually take Malcolm Watt or some of these other guys with him. I wouldn't go, I never had the front. And he'd walk around to the members, and the blokes would open the gate, and up he'd go and drink free beer in the long room all day. And then when the grand final sounded, he'd follow the winning coach onto the ground, and they all thought he was a bodyguard or something. And when Collingwood won it that year, he's walking around with the cup on his head. He even went back on the bus to the Carlton Footy Club rooms one day. He was just a legend. You get blokes like Roger Pullen, who played league football, a very funny man, Snow, and great football knowledge, great footballing family. And he was a tremendous bloke, very dry humour. And of course Herbie Campbell, the bush poet, he was a one-off. We've lost all those blokes. But, you know, you look back over the years, and fellas like Alan Harbrow, his life member, and I think he's Order of Australia or something, you know, a great honour for Fat Harbrow to be. He was a brother, twin brother to Reuben, completely different guy. Casey Hattons, your Chummy Baldwins and all these blokes, Tangle Wong, you know, you could write a book on them, just unreal. But Mooroopna was like that. You had to live here for 30 years before they recognised you, and another 10 years later they'd give you a nickname and you were in. But they're a little bit clicky like that, but they're not now. You used to know the whole town. Now you're very lucky to meet anybody down the street, you know.
I've heard you tell stories about the late Gundy James Senior.
Oh yeah.
Share us a couple of those.
Well, he was a legend, old Gundy. If anything to do with reconciliation and that, Gundy was the man. He was named after Gandhi, I think, the great man from overseas there. And Gundy was part Indian, part Aboriginal, and he was a dag. Every footy club that went on, he was a trainer. He'd get up and he'd sing songs, he'd dance, and he used to do an old rendition of an old country narrative type of song called The Deck of Cards, and he'd go through it. And if you didn't know better, you'd swear he was the bloke who wrote it. Barra Harbrow's the same. He used to sing Your Cheating Heart, and he used to say he wrote it so he could sing it to the blokes over in Vietnam when they were fighting over there. He hadn't even been over the Murray, let alone over the river. But old Gundy, he was a true legend. He lived on the edge of the swamp in McFarlane's Lane. There was a fine old house there at that stage. And yeah, he'd go down and he'd catch wild ducks and all that type of thing. The boys took him fishing with him once. He always wore a boiler suit. And they took a lot of barley grubs. And Gundy cooked them and ate them while they were out fishing. So they weren't too happy with Gundy on that particular mission. He worked for years with old Joe Baldwin. Joe had the briquettes, and they used to deliver briquettes. Of course, Gundy being a Koori, an Aboriginal bloke, he reckoned it was the cleanest job he ever had. But oil and that's brought the end of the briquettes, and he got a job at the flour mill. And he said that was the dirtiest job a black fella could ever get, working at the flour mill. He said it was terrible. He had a lot of fingers missing. And we thought they were accidents, and they were accidents all right. And he'd point them out to you, and he'd say, that end of that one, that was the deposit on the ute. And he said, that was the main one. He said, the big finger there. He said, that was the deposit on the Housing Commission place we bought in Mooroopna up in McKean Street. And he'd chop them off. And he said, oh, you're only in pain for a couple of hours, a week or so. And yeah, he said, look at the house we got. But he was different, but he's a hell of a nice bloke and do anything for anybody. Walk down the street, abuse everybody, and everybody took it with a smile. He was just a wonderful bloke.
Let's get on to your entertainment career.
Yep.
Firstly, starting with the band.
Started with a band called the Golden Rockets. I always wanted to play a musical instrument, even when I was going to school. So I went to see, Mum and Dad sent me to a fella called Frank Young. He was over in Shepparton, old Frank. He lived about where the Senior Citizens Club rooms in Wellsford Street are. The river used to run round the back of his house then. They've since diverted it and put the river at Shep through the cutting. Anyway, I got over there to learn the guitar. That's all I wanted to learn, the guitar, so I could play and sing. Just play chords. And because I used to sing at church of Stedfords and all that, and had a bit of success there. And I got up and he gave me a banjo mandolin. And I sort of mastered it. and he wanted me to play in all these string bands. We used to play in the old Shepparton Rowing Club at the time, and I'd sit there all day Sunday, and I'd sit out the front playing this thing, and I said, look, Mr. Young, I don't want to play this anymore, I want to play the guitar. Anyway, he said, we'll just get you an ordinary banjo, like George Formby and all them blokes used to have. I thought, that'll do, you know, I can sing when I'm cleaning windows. But he taught me lead picking and that, and no chords. So I said, look, I don't want to play that. So I went in and I said, look, I'm not playing that anymore. So he gave me a violin, and it's very hard to accompany yourself with a violin, you know, you can't sing very well. And he said, you know, you'll end up in a big band with that. I said, I don't want to end up in a big band, I want to play guitar. Anyway, in the end, I said, look, I'm not playing that violin and no more. He said, right, I've got just you. And he gave me a piccolo to play. Now, you ever tried to sing playing a piccolo? Very, very difficult. Anyway, I said, look, I'm not going. So I just never went back after about a fortnight of the piccolo. It also had a damaged valve on it, and I was nearly blowing my eardrums out because it was blocked. But yeah, I never went back. Anyway, he rang Mum and Dad up and he said, how's young Graeme? And they said, oh, he's all right, he's been over to see you. He said, no, he hasn't been for 5 weeks. So of course Mum and Dad fronted me that night, and I had all the money. I think it was $2 bob to go and get a music lesson. And I put the money on. I said, I'm not going back. I want to play guitar. So that was the end of that. So I started telling yarns, and they'd take me to all different shows. And one night I done a show, the Apex Antics in the Old Star Theatre. Sitting in the crowd about 5 seats back was old Frank Young, my music teacher. And he told me yarns, and I thought, he won't be happy with this. Anyway, we cleaned up after the act, and I think we had half a dozen bottles of beer between about 20 of us. And I was just starting to have a beer then, and one of the blokes came into the rooms and he said, Pee Wee, your dad wants to speak to you. I said, my dad's dead. He said, no, he said, he's Mr. Young, Frank Young. Oh, I said, he's my old music teacher. I said, he's going to give me a burst, you know. Anyway, I said, well, I'll cop it. So I walked out and I said, hey, Mr. Young, how are you? And he shook my hand. He said, I want to congratulate you. He said, that was excellent, what you done. And I said, I didn't think you liked jokes and that, Mr. Young. No, he said, it wasn't the jokes. He said, it was the delivery, the timing. He said, it was perfect. And I thought, well, that'll do me. And as he's pointed out, sometimes you can tell jokes and that, and a pause and a dead silence sometimes brings more laughter than what the punchline does. So there's a bit of a knack in it, and I guess if you're lucky, if you got it, and then you work on it and see if you can perfect it. I'm still working on it.
Some of the people you've played with in the band are legends in their own lifetime. We talk of Sandy Ackerson, Doc Harbrow, Ozzie Jones, Dempsey Johnson. Yeah, fantastic names around Mooroopna.
Oh, yeah.
And you had some fun times.
We had some great times. You know, Doc and that, he come and saw me and said, we're getting a band together, do you want to be in it? And I said, yeah, I'll have to learn a few songs now. He said, you won't be singing, you'll be playing the drums. I said, I can't play the drums. He said, Kenny Parsons, Jubilees Parsons got a set. He's there for sale. Get them and he'll give you a couple of lessons. I think I had 2 lessons and we started playing. There was Dempsey, me, Gock, and Rick Legassi, who was the footy coach at the time. He had an old tee box he used to play. He could sing one song, not very well, in a mansion on a mountain stands my love. Jim Reeves sang it. He sang it a bit different than what Rick did. And then Sandy come on board, of course, and Sandy was very professional. Built his own electric steel. We played at pub shows. We played at anything, really. A lot of love shows. We'd play shows for the footy club. And if there was a hell of a crowd there, we'd get a couple of quid. But if nobody fronted, we wouldn't get paid at all, you know. And I was married at the time. I didn't have any money to waste, you know. I was sort of counting on that money. But then Demps, he left. And we got Sandy going full-time and Kenny Anselmi come along. And Ken was great. He's still playing, Kenny. And he was a great artist and he just blended in. He was perfect. Played a lot of country and western, played a lot of rock. We played a lot of functions as sort of the support band for the old Blue Moon Orchestra. They were a very professional group. We used to play all the modern songs. And we had blokes like Frankie Davidson, who was the bloke that sang with Denise Drysdale, come from Footscray?
Ernie Sigley.
Ernie Sigley, mad as a snake. But he was a good singer, he had plenty of go. And of course we'd sing with him. We sang Jimmy Little, played with him one time. One time I was sitting home here and the phone rang, and I was having a run-in at the time, not a run-in, we had a running thing going in the public, and Pat Sleeth and myself, I'd ring up and ask him where are my tomatoes, and he'd say, you got the Royal Mail. "Hey, don't you tell me that, I know where I am." Anyway, he got me a good one, but this day the phone rang out and I knew the name, and I said, "Who am I speaking to?" He said, "Slim Dusty." "Oh, I said, "G'day, Slim." I thought, this will be Sleety. And of course, he asked me would I play at the Shep Show with him because their drummer had taken ill. And I tried to work out who it was and I couldn't. In the end I said, "No, I give up." I said, who am I talking to?" And it was Slim Dusty. And geez, I felt when I told him, he laughed, he bloody laughed. He was a hell of a nice bloke. He had a bloke playing with him at the time. He come from Tassie originally. He was the guest artist. He had a hit song out called "The Little Kangaroo." Kevin Sheegog was the bloke's name. Slim would have a cup of tea. I had a big bottle of beer. I never had stubbies. And he had one of them plugs you put in those rubber stoppers. And I'd have a glass after every second or third show. Slim would have a cuppa. And this bloke, Kevin Sheegog, he'd have a 7-ounce glass of whiskey. Nothing in it. And that's why he had a honey voice, I reckon. It was smooth. He's dead now. But he had quite a few good songs out. One Small Photograph of You. And he was a pretty good singer. But we backed up a lot of artists who come down from Melbourne, men, women and that, and we played on the Casual Club. It was the only live country show, I believe, that was going round. We played in the band there. A fellow by the name of Bill Raymond, he self-styled manager. We went out to GMB6 on this Casual Club and we'd play, and it was live. And it was, you know, pretty hard, but they got too big. Once again they started to get Melbourne artists in, and they were professional. And they wanted us to do all these wonderful songs that had been pre-written for them, you know, the music. We never had a bloody clue. We only played by ear. And most of the time that ear was on the ground trying to get something else, like another stubby or something. But we played at the Star Theatre for years. Shep Footy club rooms, pubs all around the area. And then the kids got a bit big for the missus to handle. So I give the drums to the Country Music Association. I think Casey Hatton took them, and Case played there for years. Every so often I done a return show, a command performance, but they've never sort of learned any new songs. One time there, 4 years I hadn't played with them, and I went back and Gock was still singing the same song in the same order as he was when I was playing with them. But then I got into the yarn telling, and that just snowballed, and thanks mainly to blokes like yourself and a bit of TV work, and that was good.
Pee Wee, the wall behind you is just full of thank you and acknowledgements, life membership certificates. How did you find the time to be a family man? Because family's been very important to your life.
It's probably the number one. We've got 3 beautiful boys. They've got beautiful families. We've got lovely grandkids and that. Irene's very involved, my wife. She's very involved with youth, with basketball and chip. I think she's been tied up with that for the past 40 years. She's a life member of that.
Group Legends intend to catch up with Irene after Christmas.
Yeah.
So there's one to look forward to, folks.
Yeah, I think she's got here's a bit of a sign on her, a hard worker, and when she won the Valley Sport Volunteer Administrator. But she loves the sport. It's a great interest for her, and it gives a lot of kids who wouldn't get the opportunity to play sport to get going and get them off the streets.
Yeah. It's been great, and as you said, his family's been very, very important.
Yep.
Pee Wee, we're running short of time.
Yep.
You've told some great jokes over the years. What would be your favourite of all time? I know what mine is.
It'd have to be O'Reilly, wouldn't it?
It certainly is.
That was a great joke about an Irish soccer player. But it goes on and on, but some of them you hear.
And you can't tell it anymore, can you?
No, it's very, hands-on sort of a joke. You've got to do a lot of actions in it. But no, look, you come along with me to a lot of shows, and I thank you for that. But it's a great thing to see people laugh and be happy and forget about their worries for a while. And hopefully make a few friends along the way.
Well, you made a lot of friends over the years.
Yep.
We can't finish without you telling us a joke. So the floor's all yours. And I did say one.
Only one. Well, Blake told us one the other day. It wasn't too bad. There was an Irish, not allowed to tell Irish jokes, I'll tell one about a New Guinea bloke. His name is Patrick O'Shea, and he was living in Ireland, and he was an oyster fisherman. And Patrick, he had an oyster farm about 1 kilometre offshore, and he went out one day in his boat and he never come back. Anyway, the postie was down the pub a few nights later, and he said, has anybody seen Patrick O'Shea, the oyster fisherman? I said, we haven't. He said, why do you ask? He said, well, his letterbox is full of letters. He hasn't cleared them. I knocked on the door, but nobody's home. And the harbour master said, I saw him go out in his boat 2 days ago, but I haven't seen it come back. So they said, we'll look for him tomorrow. So they went down to his house. Patrick O'Shea wasn't home. They went down to the wharf. His boat wasn't there. So they got in a boat and they went out to Patrick's oyster farm. There was his boat, moored above the oyster reef and that, out a couple of kilometres offshore. And there's Patrick lying on all these oysters in the bottom of the boat. He packed to the gunnels. It was never seen such a load of oysters. And Patrick's lying in amongst them dead. And they said, he must have had a heart attack listening all to do with oysters. They said, what do we do? They said, take him back to shore. The local constable will know what to do. So they took him back, rang the local copper. He come down. They said, what's wrong with him, constable? They said, he's dead. They said, we know that. How did he die? He said, I don't know. He said, we'll have to have a colonial inquiry. So they got the ambulance and they took poor old Patrick away and they sold all these oysters. Helped pay for the funeral. Anyway, next week we're in the pub having a beer and the local policeman walked in. He said, evening all. They said, evening, constable. Did you find out about our Patrick O'Shea? Did you get the results back from the coroner's report? He said, I did. Got them back this afternoon. They said, was it a heart attack like what we thought? No. He said, apparently it was the oysters killed Patrick. Not good.
Not good at all. Anyway, thanks very much for not only making Mooroopna and the Golden Valley a better place to live. You've given a lot of laughs to a lot of people over a long, long period of time, but also your contribution to Mooroopna. It's continuing with your work with the Historical Society and also with the Mooroopna Bowls Club, and of course you're still heavily involved with the Mooroopna Past Players Association.
Enjoying it.
And like a lot of other people in Mooroopna, we're mighty pleased to say you're a good mate of ours.
Let's hope we can stick around for a long time, Cobber.
Graeme PEE WEE Young.
Honey, maker.